Chapter 1. From the Woods to the Dunes. "There's nothing to do here," said Nick to his parents. The idea of a week-long vacation on the Oregon coast had seemed exciting at first, but once they arrived and set up their tent, Nick looked around and all he could see were trees. "Nick's right," added his younger brother, Felix. "Don't be silly," their mother said. "There's plenty to do." "Like what?" asked Nick. "Like taking a private tour with the park ranger. Your mother and I set it all up weeks ago," his father said. "Cool," said Felix, jumping up from the log he and Nick were sitting on. "Let's go." Their mother gave them bottles of water and little bags of trail mix. "This way," she called as she headed off. "Slow down," Nick called out. He wanted to have time to look around. Everything here was so different from the city. The city was cluttered with cars, buildings, people, and loud noises. In the woods, there was nothing but trees and the gentle shh of the wind. Up ahead, Nick could see that Felix had reached the edge of the forest and stopped. Beside him was a woman wearing a green uniform. When Nick caught up, his eyes filled with wonder. They were standing on top of a hill made of sand. Below them was the ocean. The air was filled with the salty smell of the water. All around them were more hills of sand. Some were small. Others, like the one they stood on, were huge. Nick felt a little dizzy as he looked down. "We must be at least 50 feet up," Nick said. 50 is close," the woman in the uniform said with a smile. "My name is Ida. I'm a park ranger. I look after the woods and the beaches here. I'm going to show you two around." Felix and Nick started off with Ida. "I thought beaches were flat," stated Felix. "Most are," replied Ida. "But what makes the beaches of the Oregon coast special is that they are surrounded by sand dunes." "That's what we're standing on?" asked Nick. "That's right," answered Ida. "Over thousands of years, the rock from these mountains behind us was carried down here by the rivers. As it was washed downstream to the ocean, it crumbled and became sand. Then the winds blew the sand into these big mounds." "Are sand dunes still being made?" asked Nick. "Yes," said Ida. "Sand dunes change all the time. The tides of the ocean wash more sand onto the beaches. The winds blow that sand into new dunes and add it to old ones. Sometimes sand dunes can cover an entire forest." After the tour, Ida told the boys that they could look around on their own for a while. She arranged to meet them at a small beach nearby. "Remember to be careful around the tops and edges of the dunes. It's only sand, and it gives way easily," Ida said as she left. Nick watched as Ida walked away. Then he ran after Felix. "Wait up," he called. Felix stopped and turned back to Nick. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Nick stopped and listened. From somewhere nearby, he could hear what sounded like a dog barking. The brothers started walking again. The barking got louder. Finally, the barking was so loud that Nick could think of nothing else. "That barking is so loud," moaned Felix, putting his hands over his ears. Nick looked around. He saw only the rolling dunes in the forest. Where was the barking coming from, he wondered. "Nick!" cried Felix. "Look down there!" Nick looked below them. At the bottom of the dunes lay a little beach between the ocean and the high sand dunes. On the beach stood the dog that the boys had heard barking. The dog was black all over except for its chest and paws, which were white. The dog stopped barking when it saw them. It watched them with its head tilted to one side and its ears pointing up toward them. It seemed like the dog was waiting to see what they would do. Nick could see that the tide of the ocean was coming in. The little beach was getting smaller. The dog was trapped. Chapter 2. From the Dunes to the Beach. "We have to get down to that dog somehow," Nick said to his brother. "If we don't save him soon, the tide will come in and he'll drown." "The dunes look like a big skateboard bowl," said Felix. "We could use some pieces of wood and slide down. It would be cool." Nick shook his head. "If we did that, there'd be no way to get back up. Remember what Ida said about the sand? It can be dangerous." "What about that?" Felix asked. He had spotted an old rope that was tied to a stump at the end of the forest. "Good idea," said Nick. "It looks like someone left it here as a way of getting down to the beach. We can throw the end over the dunes and use it to get down." "Hold on," Felix cried out to the dog as Nick threw the rope over the top of the dune. "I'll go first," said Nick. He held the rope with both hands and started to climb down the dune. His feet slid on the soft sand. He was a little more than halfway down when Felix grabbed the rope and started down too. "Wait, Felix," Nick called out. "We don't know if the rope can hold both of us." "Don't worry so much," Felix shouted back. "I'm little." Nick was almost at the bottom when he heard a low sound. Creak! Suddenly, the rope gave way. The stump that the rope was tied to had broken. Nick fell to the beach. Felix tumbled down on top of him and landed with an oomph. "Are you okay?" Nick asked his brother as they got to their feet. "I think so," said Felix, brushing the sand off his body with his hands. He looked up to the top of the dune they had fallen from. "I should have listened to you about the rope. I'm sorry. How are we going to get back up?" Nick held the loose rope in his hands. He was disgusted with himself. He should have checked the stump before they started climbing. He was the older brother and was supposed to look out for Felix. Now he had gotten them both into trouble. He wondered how they would get back up. He thought of calling out to Ida for help, but knew it would do no good. She wouldn't hear them over the sound of the waves. The dog ran over to Nick and started licking his hand. He petted the dog on the head. "It's okay, boy. I'll think of something," Nick said as he looked out to the ocean. The tide was still coming in. He didn't know about the dog, but luckily he and Felix were both strong swimmers. Chapter 3, From the Beach to the Ocean. Nick looked down at the dog. Again, it tilted its head and looked back at him with a sad look on its face. "I don't know," Nick said to the dog. "I don't know what to do." He looked up at the dunes and knew that there was no way they would climb up that slippery sand. He looked around at the beach. It was cluttered with logs and pieces of wood that had been washed up with the tides. Some of the logs seemed to be attached to each other. "I wonder what his name is," said Felix, looking at the dog. Nick saw that the dog was wearing a collar with a metal tag. He read the tag. "His name is Larry," he told Felix. He petted the dog again. "Hey, Larry." Larry thumped his tail in reply. "I bet he's hungry," said Felix. "I'm going to feed him the trail mix Mom gave us." Felix poured the mix into his hand and held it out to Larry. Larry ate the trail mix. Then Felix poured some water from his bottle into his hand and let Larry lap it up. When he was done, Larry looked up at Felix and made a little begging sound. Felix let him drink the rest of his water and then gave him the water from Nick's bottle. It was gone quickly. "He must have been out in the sun for a long time," said Nick. Recharged, Larry began to bark again. He jumped around in front of the boys. "Wow," said Felix. "I've never heard anything so loud in my whole life." Larry ran around in a circle. He barked again. Nick turned around. All he could see was sand and the logs and sticks. "It looks like he's pointing at that wood scattered over there," Nick said, scratching his head. "I wonder what he wants." Larry bounded over to the wood and picked up one of the smaller logs. He dragged the log over to Nick and dropped it at Nick's feet. He looked up and wagged his big, bushy tail. "Oh, he wants to play," said Felix. He picked up the log with both hands and threw it down the beach. Larry ran after it and dragged it back to Felix. Felix bent down to pick up the log. "Wait, Larry's giving me an idea," cried Nick. "Some of these logs look like they were part of a raft. If we tie on a few more logs, we can sit on it and ride it out onto the ocean. Ida said that she would meet us at a small beach nearby. We can use the raft to reach it." Together with their new friend Larry, the boys set about fixing the raft. With Larry's help, Felix found logs that were the right size and laid them next to the raft. Nick rubbed the middle of the rope over a sharp rock, cutting it in two. He used the two pieces to attach the logs to the raft. Then Nick and his brother pushed the raft out into the water. It floated. Excited by their success, the brothers quickly waded out into the water behind the raft. "Come on, Larry," Nick called out. "Come on, boy." The dog ran into the water and paddled into Nick's arms. Nick lifted him up onto the raft. He helped Felix up onto the floating wooden platform and then climbed up himself. The raft rocked up and down and swayed back and forth in the tide. "How are we going to make it go where we want it to?" asked Felix. "Wait here," said Nick. He jumped back off the raft. "Well, where else am I going to go?" Felix joked. Nick waded through the water back to the beach. He looked around until he saw what he needed. He grabbed a long stick and made his way back to Felix and Larry. "I can use this stick to push us forward and control the raft," Nick said. He looked around to see where they had to go to reach Ida. He saw that above the dunes to one side there was only sky. To the other side he could see a small beach. "We'll go this way," Nick decided, pointing in the direction of the beach. Nick suggested that Felix lie on the back of the raft with his feet in the water. When Felix kicked, the raft moved slowly forward. Nick moved Larry to the front of the raft to keep their weight balanced. With his long stick, Nick was able to push off against the ocean floor. Soon, he and Felix were sweating. It was hard, slow work, but they were moving forward. Larry wagged his tail in support. Chapter 4, and home, again, with a new friend. Felix kept kicking, Nick kept pushing, and Larry kept wagging. Soon they could no longer see the beach where they began. They followed the line of the dunes, keeping the shore in sight the whole time. Nick looked back at Felix and saw that his kicks were getting slower. "Don't give up, we're almost there," Nick called. His own arms were aching, but he knew they had to press onward. They came around a bend in a line of high dunes, and Nick saw the beginning of another beach. He gave a few extra hard pushes with his stick, and more of the beach came into view. There was Ida standing on the beach with another ranger. They spotted the raft as it came around the dunes, and the other ranger yelled, "Larry!" Larry leaped off the raft and swam to shore. Nick felt his heart sink a little at the thought that Larry had someone else that he loved. With a few final pushes and kicks, Nick and Felix got the raft onto the beach. Tired but relieved, they walked toward Ida. Ida looked surprised. "How did you find Tony's dog?" Nick explained how they had found Larry on the beach and rescued him on the raft. "I can't thank you boys enough," the woman said. "I thought I had lost Larry for good. He keeps taking off whenever I have a tour group." "You're welcome," Nick said. "Do you think we could play with Larry for a little bit each day? He could be our scout and help us explore." "Of course," Tony replied. "He seems to really like you boys. I work here every day and I would welcome someone to keep an eye on Larry when I am busy." Nick leaned down to pet Larry. "We'll see you tomorrow, boy," he said. The boys said goodnight to Ida and Tony and then followed the trail back to their tent. Their parents had started a campfire and were roasting hot dogs. The smell was delicious. Nick and Felix plopped down on a log in front of the fire, and Nick told his mom and dad of their adventures. "That sure was smart of you to think of using a raft, Nick," their father said, "but I wish that you had called an adult to help you." Suddenly, they saw Larry run out of the forest. He joined them by the fire. Tony was right behind, out of breath from chasing her dog. Nick felt Larry nuzzle his leg. Larry looked first at Nick, then at the hot dog Nick was holding. "Can I give him one?" Nick asked Tony. "Well, okay," she said. "Just one."